So hello everyone, I'm Arnaud, I'm the Deputy CEO of Bpifrance. This is the last one, I guess, before the lunch. So hang on, we come with a great promise actually, which is bringing you behind the scenes of what's happening when finance guys talk to sports guys. How you do build business, how you make things happen. This is what we are going to talk about today with my friends. So first, Faisal from PIF. Please, Faisal, join us. Then music, and then Jaime from LALIGA. And we have Tristram from Apollo Capital. And Alain from BPCE. Please, Alain. So guys, thank you for joining us. So we're going to talk about what's happening when you talk to the big sports club, the big sports IP guys. What can you bring on top of capital to them? So maybe to start with, please, can you describe what you do in a sentence, very rapidly? Maybe Faisal, to start, what do you do when you speak to a club?
All right, so very nice to be here. Thank you very much for having me. My name is Feras. I come from PIF, and we invest institutionally in the entire ecosystem when it comes to 13 different sectors, of which sports is one of the subsectors. We invest in a way that tries to build towards the Vision 2030 strategy for the government, and we do it in an institutional way that tries to upgrade sport, taking it away from the emotional volatility and converting it into an asset class that is investable, structured, and a lot more sustainable.
So Jaime, you're on the other side somehow.
Yes, well, first of all, very happy to be here, especially as a former Lycée Français student. It's great to be here in Paris. So we are, as you said, on the other side of the table. At La Liga, we run the first and the second division. We organize the competition, and particularly in my case, I run the club's office. So that's a club service department within La Liga to help the clubs to grow on the business side. And in the CVC deal, or private equity deal, from the club's office, we help the club to invest correctly the funds. So that's mainly our day-to-day.
Tristram.
I'm Chief Investment Officer of Europe for Apollo. Apollo is one of the world's largest alternative investment managers, and we've recently raised dedicated capital for sports, Apollo Sports Capital. We have a few marquee investments there, most notably Atletico de Madrid. But the idea is that we invest in a way with unconstrained capital in the sports ecosystem. So it can be clubs, stadium financing, a wide range of things in between, really a broad array of solutions for the sports ecosystem, and it's a growing part of our business.
Alain?
Hi, good morning. Thank you, Arnaud, for your invitation. So I'm belonging to a group called BPCE. We have two main angles. With Natixis, we are advising and financing our clients, be it investors or issuers, on a global basis. So we are trying to work with Apollo and PIF. On the other side, with BPCE, we try to be very local, very close to any kind of players in the sport, and trying to work mainly on infrastructure attached to the territories in France.
Okay, so obviously we're talking about sports. So obviously it's about passion, it's about entertainment, it's something very specific, but it's also something we invest in as financier, if I may say. Maybe Alain, to start with you, when you look at an investment opportunity, what is different, what is specific in sport as compared to any other kind of business? What is fun, what is difficult when you do that?
Actually, when you assess the quality or you work on sport deals, it's pretty different. Of course, you take care about financials, but you have other kind of key components of the assessment of the quality of an investment. You know, you have to deal with predictable cash flow on one side, but also with the performance of the sport club, right? And on top of that, you need to deal with specific regulation, specific league, the way you need to assess the quality, and on top of that, you need also to assess the quality of the ecosystem around the sport, such as the fan loyalty, such as the brand name, the historical brand of the company. So this is, which makes specific on this asset class, is that it's decorrelated to the classical traditional economy and when you invest on bonds, on equity, on real estate. And that's, for me, one of the attraction for investors. Decorrelated and sometimes, when well structured, protected against inflation.
Okay, Tristram, maybe you are the long-term investor, one of the long-term investors, but let's say you are the classic long-term investor. When you look at an investment opportunity, where is the value creation? You have to create value over the long term. How do you do that? What do you bring to the companies, to the clubs you invest in as, again, a long-term capital and debt investor?
I think it would be short-sighted of us to think that just turning up with capital is an answer in itself. The amazing sports franchises we look at all need capital, certainly. But I think we can bring quite a lot more than that. First of all, we can think creatively about the best cost of capital for a business. Doesn't always have to be high-cost equity capital. There are multiple ways we can work with clubs to ensure that their access to capital is as flexible as possible. But then really, I think the value creation for us goes beyond access to capital and goes on the way that capital is deployed. If you think about the network of businesses we have as a huge alternative asset manager, portfolio companies we own, businesses we're connected to, the different expertise we have across areas like real estate development, for example, these adjacencies can be very, very powerful for the clubs we're involved with. So, you know, we can help source and professionalize sponsorship arrangements, for example, through the huge network of companies we're engaged with. We can help source, structure, provide capital for real estate development, stadium development, etc. So the breadth of the Apollo ecosystem being brought to bear on a club aligned with that club's goals. So it's very, very important that everything we're doing is aligned with the direction the club was taking. It has to be in harmony with the club's goals. But there's an awful lot more than just providing capital that we can do.
Yeah. And talking about providing more, so we had that thrilling discussion just before about building the ecosystem. So you build the ecosystem around the club. And Faisal, we had this discussion that you build the ecosystem at the regional level. What's the clue to do that?
I think from our perspective, the ecosystem is a bit broader than maybe Tristan's view because we're attached to a broader strategy that is driven by the government, driven by Vision 2030, that then gets cascaded to the different ministries, federations, and then all of the different pieces of the ecosystem. So to my colleagues' point, the word ecosystem is very key here. What we're trying to do is ensure that we are at first identifying what is missing for said sport, said club, said league. Is there a systemic issue? Does that provide and create an opportunity that can bring with it financial opportunity that can then attract third-party capital? But at the same time, it has to be attached to very localized, clear targets in terms of what is the return on investment from an economic perspective? Am I being able to create jobs? Am I actually helping on the social front as well? And that's the lens that we look at.
It's amazing. Maybe we will zoom in on you, Jaime. We have like to have you. So we have the opportunity to dig into one very specific deal, very new somehow. I will let you explain what La Liga Impulso is, and mostly maybe tell us what you were looking for. What was the aim of doing this deal?
Okay, so 4 years ago, La Liga sold between 8 and 10% stake at La Liga. to a private equity, CVC, for around 2 billion euros. And those 2 billion euros, they go to the clubs. So 95% of the amount goes to the clubs. And originally, what we wanted to do is basically that the clubs invest correctly the funds. Why? Because, you know, in Spain, we've been very successful on the pitch. We've won, especially on a club level, a lot of tournaments internationally. And we've developed the sports side a lot. And what we saw is that the business side of the clubs were not that developed. So what we wanted is for the clubs to invest correctly. So basically, out of the 2 billion euros, the clubs need to invest 15% for canceling debt. So, you know, back in 2021, after the COVID crisis, 15% for buying players, and 70% for investment for growth. And that's where the club's office enters the scene to help and control the correct use of those funds. Today, we still have around 500 million euros still to be invested. The clubs need to send us their initiatives, and we need to validate them. And that was key because, you know, on the sports side, when money enters a club, an ecosystem, it goes directly to the players. And as Javier said a lot, the result is that a player buys his 10th Ferrari instead of the 9th Ferrari. So what we wanted is to invest to have a big return. Because what at La Liga we thought is if you have bigger clubs, you're going to end up having a bigger league. And if you have a bigger league, you're going to have bigger clubs. So it's super important for us. And from the club's office, our day-to-day is obviously control the funds, especially at the beginning of the deal. But now it's a lot about culture. It's about changing the culture of the clubs. Speaking to the CEOs of the clubs, you know, in Spain we have first and second division. You can imagine their main focus is the sports side. But we need to convince them that they need to put focus on the business side to have a bigger return. So what we are seeing is a huge transformation of the ecosystem. Obviously, a big amount of the money is going to infrastructure. We are saying in Spain, the last big refurbishment of stadium was in 1982 for the World Cup in Spain. The average age of our stadium is around 40 years old. So we are transforming everything. And key data for us is the UK has 11% of hospitality seats in their stadiums. Spain, 4 years ago, had 2.5. Now we are around 5% of hospitality seats in our total seats in the stadium, and our objective is to be around 9%. So more hospitality seats, new stadiums, more return, bigger clubs, bigger league. So that's the objective.
Amazing. So it's a virtuous cycle, but it's very complex to create, right? It's
That's
a lot of interest to align. Between these interests to align and the capital investor, usually there's an advisor. Usually the advisor is the banker. So Alain, I guess you like to get stuck in this very uncomfortable place between the sports interest and the capital interest. How do you deal with that? How do you handle being the man in the middle?
Well, first of all, we are, I think, especially in Europe, we are currently creating a kind of stable, visible, growing market, which is for me pretty new. On that front, in order to match, in interest on both sides, I think we need, and it's not often that I'm going to say that, we need to import some lessons from what happened in America, where effectively what you describe as a success story of La Liga is clearly a question of scalability, right? Scalability and unified market. When you come in Europe, the issue that you have to deal with is obviously the fragmented market in which we are operating, point number one. Second point, stable and consistent and sustainable media rights, which is not often the case. Strong governance. if you look at what happened in America, which is a much more mature market on sport, they have probably matched those kind of, difficulties. This is the fantastic success of La Liga, honestly, in order to create a kind of global vision at La Liga level and to keep on having a local reach and to let the local players, which is super important because at the end of the day, when you talk about hospitality, you talk about fans. When you talk about fans, you need to take care about local. So this is where we have to find the right, match between global and local. But for me, we will keep on developing and following the trend of La Liga if we are able, to overcome this story of very local market, very fragmented. We need simplification, and we need a kind of unified type of setup on which investors will be comfortable because they will have visibility on the long run.
I guess we can all agree that Europe needs more simplification all the time, especially on sport, but not only on sport. On top of that, there is everything around the sports club, as Tristram mentioned. Do you also look at, the industrial service, the services, the industry around sport? Is it also part of what you're doing, I guess, at BPCE to build a bigger ecosystem somehow by providing a whole value chain around sport?
Well, you're fully right, Arnaud. What we are looking at when we are assessing, we try to work within the ecosystem and to value all the components of the ecosystem from effectively the validity and the stability of the governance, but also the level of the hospitality, the evolution on the digital and technological footprint of such assets that we need to look at. So yes, on top of everything that I said, we look at effectively the validity of the ecosystem, which again will make investors in a trust situation to invest on the long run. Because the point which is the most important, we need long-term investors involved in the party.
Okay. We were, I think this idea that we can learn lessons from mostly the US about how to build a business around sport is very interesting. We had this discussion just before about rugby. The thing in Europe is that you have this local component, which is very specific. You have fans, you have the soul of the sport. Tristram, when you want to create value, you can get inspiration from other places, but how do you make sure you strike this right balance between the history of the sport, the soul of the sport, the local guys, and building a business which is going to be successful and ambitious?
Yeah, obviously I work for an American company, so I won't be too critical of the way they do things across the Atlantic. But there's a difference.
I did not mean to be critical.
But there is a difference between the sport ecosystem in the US, which is highly professionalized, highly commercialized, very successful, let's be clear. And I think the way you need to be in Europe to be sensitive to the soul of these clubs. Because if you think about what makes sport attractive as an investment, it's the cohesiveness of the fan base. It's the amount of time, attention, and money that fans are willing to put into their club because of the passion they feel for it and the way they feel it represents them. So to the extent you do anything that breaks that linkage, that trust, that connection between the fan base and the club, you're really damaging your asset. So that's the base of the value of the club, the league, whatever, the sports IP, is that connection and that sense of identity that the fan base have with it. So, the way we certainly approach it is we have to be aligned with the goals of the club. There's no benefit to coming in with a totally distinct plan to drive commercial success at the cost of the soul of the club or the sporting success of the club. It has to be in harmony. The commercial goals have to be working for the success on the pitch and the success of the community around the club, and vice versa. And I think getting that right is going to be the key to unlocking the incredible potential, financial potential of European sport, but you have to bring the communities along with you.
Very clear. And if you want to go one step beyond that, Faisal, you're probably the one who has the firepower, the history, the ability to choose a sport, to choose a club, and make it international, make it big, bring it into the Middle East region? What can you do? When do you do it? How do you do it?
I'm going to take two different examples that we've done this and the experience we've gone through. So one example is we privatized the top 4 clubs in the Saudi Pro League, and they're all under our management inside of PIF. This brings a very special challenge to what my colleagues were talking about in terms of respecting the identity of each of those clubs, while also ensuring that you're helping them upgrade their capabilities, introducing the right level of governance, giving them the right level of institutional support, while maintaining the level of respect to the fan base and to the club's ethos itself. So that's a challenge that we currently have been going through over the past 3 years, and I believe successfully through our partnership with FIFA and the AFC ensured that each club is an independent club managed by that fan base, managed by that board, but still has access to the PIF's slew of services that are available. Which brings me to the second example I wanted to use, which is our investment into tennis. So you were asking, I think indirectly also, how do you make a decision on which sport to go to? To decide on an investment at the sizes that we're doing in new sports, when it's not an existing club or an existing sport, we started by looking at, does the sport have an existing fan base? The fan base in terms of people who are willing to watch the sport, and then people are willing to participate in the sport, which is equally important. And then the third lens was, is there enough infrastructure to support an investment of the size that we wanted to do? And the example I'm going to use here is tennis. So there was a 3-pronged approach to our investment in tennis. One was a high-value investment in the asset itself, acquiring the license for a Masters 1000 to be hosted in Saudi Arabia in 2028 onwards. And then with that, there was a second stream, which was, how do we try to impact the tennis culture by doing other initiatives that embed PIF's name and Saudi's name to make it synonymous with tennis? And one of those initiatives was done by PIF, sponsoring a lot of the events and hosting a lot of the events in Saudi, but also introducing initiatives that were important to the sport. 2 initiatives were introduced, one to the ATP, which was introducing the ATP IQ, which was an online platform funded by PIF in partnership with the ATP, providing data to 2,000 plus athletes that they did not have access to before, which will eventually help the sport grow. And then on the WTA side, we created the Maternity Support Fund, which helped the female athletes during the entire life cycle of maternity, pre, during, and post. So these are, on the cultural front, trying to make our name synonymous and attached to this sport. And then lastly, it's the infrastructure, like Tristan was highlighting. Gidea, a few weeks ago, announced the National Tennis Center, which will not only be ready to host events at the size of ATPs and WTAs, but also have over 30 practice pitches, have academies in place, so that we can double down on our investment in tennis and make sure that it becomes a greenfield space and a greenfield sport.
So sport, like football, tennis. This one is not on the script. Which one is the next one?
The next one is, I'm going to say tennis just because it's
it's the current one.
The current one is tennis. The focus is on tennis. We've already made a few big announcements. Hopefully the next stage is perfecting tennis. I think one which I can talk about comfortably is, the next one is, when we're looking at sports, we're not only looking at the actual sport. You have to look at the entire sports adjacent space. So as the World Cup 2034 is coming up for us, yes, it's 9 years away, but 9 years goes very fast in this space. What are the things that are in need of upgrades, in need of being ready for the World Cup to be a successful event? Stadium management, facility management, infrastructure, all of these spaces are equally important. And lastly, when it comes to sports adjacent, it's sports media.
Absolutely. Okay. So one question for you all, maybe to build up on all we have been saying until now. If you want to build a long-term successful partnership between sports IP, let's say clubs, and capital investors, how do you do it, and what mistake do you want to avoid? Maybe Jaime, to start with you, what is the thing you would not do again?
Not do again?
There is one.
Wow.
And what is the key to success?
I mean,
whatever.
I think that for an investor entering the sport, it's complicated to understand at the beginning the way it works, and especially the politics in sports. I think that at La Liga, this is something that we've managed, I think, pretty well. Javier has the support of mostly of all the clubs of La Liga. And it's really important to have in mind that the interest of the club, of one club, is not always the interest of all the clubs. And La Liga, his own rule or his mandate is to take into account what is good for the 42 clubs. And sometimes you have to take uncomfortable decisions. And this is something that well, you need to have you need to be proud to do it. And sometimes in sports, it's something that it's hard make that decisions. That decisions that put you just in face of, in front of a club, a big club sometimes. But you have to keep in mind that you need to look for the interest of the 42 clubs at the Liga level. I think from our perspective, this is something that we've done with the CVC deal. I don't see anything that well, always you can do better things, but I think we are really happy in how we are doing. Example, a few months ago, we had we sold our TV rights on the national markets. Record for us this year, record in attendance. So I think we are following the right path. Private equities, investors, they want to add value, and they add value, but they need sometimes to trust also the knowledge that we have of this particular industry.
Trust. Alain?
For me, one of the key success, adding to what Jaime just said, is alignment on investment horizon. Usually, sport IP value compound on 10 years. If you have only investors that want to have the return on 5 years, we're going to have an issue. So we need to create a market where you have long-term investors. And I think, again, long-term investors need trust. Player like you, Arnaud, BPI, bring trust in the model as well. On the very long term.
We do.
Yes, you do.
We intend to.
And I think it's one of the things that for me is super important, to try to work on the line, and then you have the condition to make sure that the usual big investors will be comfortable on the long term, which we already described. The mistake I think we need or we should avoid is probably to consider that only the financial return immediate will create the market. It's not going to happen that way. So you will build the market if effectively you have this combination about long-term vision and a capacity to take into account what you said, the passion of the sport, the fan, the identity, and the way the club is managed.
Very clear. Tristram?
I think the key is understanding what you're good at and what you're not good at. We at Apollo are good at many things. We're good operators of businesses. We are good thinkers about financial matters. We're not footballers. We don't know all that much about football. And so for us, if you look at, and by the way, obviously our sports investments go a long way beyond football, but I'm thinking of our investment in Atlético de Madrid. It's important there that we know what we can bring to the broader commercial aspects and the broader ecosystem and the financing, et cetera. And it's important we know what we can't. And so setting up a situation where you're aligned with the goals of the club, you know, we were buying into a club where we had confidence in the trajectory, we had confidence in the existing plan. Do we think we can help? Yes, but we're not trying to turn things around and drive them in a totally different direction, which I think people would find jarring, and I think runs the risk of bringing you into conflict with the goals of your fan base and the community around the club. So knowing what you can bring, using the breadth of expertise and network you have to make that as effective as possible without trying to drive things in a direction that isn't organic for the sports assets, I think is a really, really important way to proceed.
Do you think that sometimes loving that sport so much as an individual, because again, it's very personal sport, can be a risk amongst your investor people, that can it change the way you look at the investment opportunity sometimes.
We all know, as fans of sport, that we're not rational actors sometimes. Our subjective assessment of the probability of our team winning is not normally, doesn't normally stand very well up to scrutiny. So obviously there are risks in making risk decisions and financial decisions based on emotion. But at the same time, as we said earlier, the emotion around the club is, or the sport asset, is what's the core of the value. So yes, you have to be somewhat dispassionate in making your investment decisions and your strategic decisions, but at the same time, you have to recognize that you're harnessing an emotion which is the core of the value proposition.
Okay. Feras, you have probably a very interesting view on that because you are, as you were mentioning, you are the shareholders of different clubs that compete together. So what is the long-term relation and the partnership between you and them?
I want to answer that question, but I also want to double-click on what Tristram was talking about in terms of it's also important when you're deciding to invest in sports is to realize sports is not only teams. Investing in sports, and La Liga have a great example here, investing in the league itself, and investing in the federations, investing in the infrastructure can still get you that emotional connection to sport, but without, and it allows you to de-risk it from being too close to the fan base. I think that's an important lens, and it's part of the investment thesis that we follow when we're looking at the different sports that we'll act upon. When it comes to what's the long-term plan, for the clubs themselves, every PIF investment, whether sport or not, has to have an exit plan. Our exit horizon is anywhere between 7 to 9 years, and part of the reason we took on these 4 clubs was to help institutionalize the sector in partnership with the ministry, but also to try and take these clubs and convert them in ways that Jaime was talking about with the La Liga clubs, simple things, introducing governance, introducing financial modeling, introducing better decision-making and data analytics. And once the club is ready and feels mature enough, and then there's an appetite from the private sector, we'd be looking to do more of a partnership with the private sector to take on the next part of the journey.
Okay. Arnaud, I would like to jump in because, in the past 4 or 5 years, we've been approached by a lot of investors, and they ask 2 questions. How much can I spend in players? We have financial fair play at La Liga, so they know exactly the amount of money they can expend. And they ask, the second question is, how much money I am earning from the TV rights? And we know exactly the total amount of money that they can receive from TV rights. So for us, it's key to have certainty in cost and in revenues. So that's super important for them.
I can confirm that as an investor. So maybe we're in France. So thank you, by the way, for coming here. Maybe a last word, because I've been very poor at keeping time. I knew it would happen. This was a freeing discussion, and we went for too long. But maybe a last word on what can we do to foster the French ecosystem. What would be your advice? I mean, we have great assets, we have great teams, we have great players, we have a great industry around sports, we have crazy fans sometimes. What can we do to really build on that, to get to the next level, to be able to compare to some other ecosystems, which we have to be honest are in terms of sport business, in front of us? Maybe starting with you, Feras.
That's a bit of a loaded question, but I'll take a stab at it.
Short answers, please.
Short answer. I think I would try to capitalize on a global fandom. Today, the French clubs, French teams have very strong local and regional support, and I think going beyond the European fan base might have to be the next step in trying to ensure that more capital and more commercial revenues are coming.
I think that if I speak in general, not only about France, but especially for the football industry, we need to build up strong leagues, because leagues are the base of the ecosystem. Without strong leagues, without strong clubs, we are not having a success. And Tristram was saying before, fans. In Spain, last season, Oviedo, second division club, they have been for 24 years in second division. They got promoted to first division. 300,000 people went to the streets to celebrate. This season, Malaga, my home city, they got promoted to first division. 200,000 people get to the street. It's not about big club. It's about having the ecosystem and small and medium clubs being able to compete. And that's what a league needs, what the football industry needs. You don't want more games between big clubs. What you want is games in your league and that the success in your league gets you to jump into the next level. And that's something that in France also it's important to keep in mind.
For sure.
I think a theme that I've been consistently reiterating in this conversation has been the balance. And I think, you know, for France, as for Europe generally, striking that balance between openness to international capital, openness to new ideas. We talked a little bit earlier about the inherent conservatism of some sports communities. And I think that's connected to this desire to preserve the soul and all the good things we've been mentioning. But striking that balance is really important. And progress does sometimes mean openness to slightly uncomfortable ideas. And so, you know, I think my urging to everyone in the French sports ecosystem would be to acknowledge the need for that balance. It doesn't mean out with the old and in with the new. It means acknowledging the discomfort of progress, and sometimes that will come with international capital and ideas that may even have come across the Atlantic, although it's a long way to go without changing.
Alain?
I do believe that in France, we don't lack of capital or potential investors. I think what have been done on the last years regarding attraction of France for non- or foreign investors have been a real success. What we are lacking today in order to make it a success in France, it's predictability, meaning that we need to have more predictable media rights, which will give visibility and stability. I do believe that it's the key of success for tomorrow.
Thank you so much. Thank you all of you. Thank you everyone in the room.
Thank you.
Enjoy the rest of the day.